You think you run this class? Stand up. Now, Mr. Pritchard barked like a hallway guard dog of power that had just caught the scent of black skin, his fingers twitching toward Malik's neck right before the doors slammed and his mother stormed in. The rumor would later flatten into headlines, into a sentence with sharp corners and no air. A teacher put his hand on a student's neck. But in room 214 it was a mess of breath and noise and shock, a moment that stretched like taffy and then snapped. Malik Carter was 15 and tall for his age, a kid whose quiet made teachers underestimate him until he spoke. He was bent over a physics worksheet, pencil tapping a syncopated beat that only he could hear. Outside, rain stitched the October morning to the windows. Inside, Mr. Pritchard paced like a metronome set too fast, the soles of his shoes clicking at the end of every row. Phones away, he'd barked 3 times already. The 4th time wasn't about phones. It was about Malik's tapping, about a question that came out as, "I'm not sure the coefficient," and got answered with a glare that said, "Not now." Someone's backpack slid off a chair and thumped the floor. Someone else laughed. The room, always at a simmer, flared. "Stand up," Pritchard snapped at Malik. "If you're going to perform, do it where we can all see." Malik's chest pinched. He stood because it was easier than disobeying, easier than adding logs to a fire that was clearly looking for fuel. He kept his eyes on the worksheet. "I just asked." "Asked?" The teacher stepped close enough that Malik could smell the coffee on his breath. "Asked? You people always challenge first and call it a question later." The words hit like thrown pennies. Jada, 3 desks over, stopped moving. "Mr. Pritchard," she said quietly. "He wasn't." "Zip it," Pritchard snapped, and then he reached. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't even a full choke. It was a fast, ugly clamp of fingers at the base of Malik's neck, a push that pinned him to the edge of his desk and said, "You will bend to the shape I have for you." Malik's fingers shot out and braced against the desktop. His legs locked. The room disappeared into the narrow tunnel that opens when your body decides survival matters more than dignity. His breath went loud in his own head. "Don't you touch me," Malik said, but it came out like gravel, thin as thread. "Stop!" Jada's chair screeched back. 2 more students stood up at once. One had a phone. Someone else had their hands over their mouth. The world became shards, the blue of the bulletin board, the squeal of desk legs, the stricken face of the new kid who'd just moved from Detroit. Pritchard's fingers dug in for a second, then snapped back as if the heat had finally reached his hand. "Everyone sit," Pritchard said. His voice shook. "Everyone sit now." Malik swayed and found himself sitting without remembering how he got there. The outline of the teacher's hand burned at his neck. Shame and rage, 2 currents in the same river, braided in his chest. The bell rang amused at its own timing, and the room exploded into motion. Some kids fled. Others hovered. A boy whispered, "I got it on video." Jada didn't move. She slid to Malik's side and put her palm on the desk near his elbow like a tiny anchor. "You okay?" she asked. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to say no. He wanted language to be big enough. Instead, he swallowed. It hurt. He nodded, a lie that was almost true. Pritchard stood at the whiteboard, staring at something only he could see. The calm he wore like a uniform had torn open. He looked at Malik like he was looking through him, then down at his own hands, as if they were strangers. "Go to the nurse," he said finally, without turning. "Take a pass." Malik didn't take the pass. He walked out with Jada, the hallway a tunnel where the sound of his own breath was the only honest thing. He could feel eyes on him, could feel the video the same way you feel thunder before you hear it. By the time they reached the nurse's office, the secretary was already glancing at her monitor, murmuring, "Oh, God." On a different side of town, a phone vibrated on a metal prep table. Ava Carter was on her lunch break at the Miss station, unwrapping a sandwich she wouldn't get to eat. The text from Jada said only room 214. He put hands on Malik. The next one was a 30-second clip. You could see a teacher's wrist, the fast flinch. Malik's shoulders pinched like a wing pinned down. Ava did not feel her body stand. She did not feel the sandwich wrap crumple in her fist. She only felt something ancient unlatch inside her, slow and seismic, the kind of hinge that swings a mother through any door between her and her child. She grabbed her keys. "Station 3, I'm out," she called over her shoulder. "Call it in," someone said, but Ava was already in the bright day, sliding behind the wheel. The siren on her dash wasn't authorized for personal use. She didn't reach for it. She would not need it. At Roosevelt High, the nurse was gentle and wide-eyed. "Any trouble swallowing? Headache? Dizziness?" She clicked the penlight and watched Malik's pupils contract, then widen. "You might be in a little shock," she said softly. Jada's foot jittered a nervous drumbeat. "I sent your mom the video," she whispered. Malik closed his eyes. His hands shook more than he wanted them to. "Thanks," he said, because gratitude was a way to keep from breaking. Out in the administrative wing, the principal's phone lit up with the superintendent's number. 2 doors down, the school resource officer finished a lukewarm coffee and muttered, "Here we go." And at the front entrance, rainwater still shimmering on the mat, a woman in a navy E shirt pushed the door so hard it ricocheted off the stopper and rang like a bell. "Where is my son?" Ava asked the receptionist. "Ma'am, we." Ava didn't stop at the desk. In room 214, the whiteboard still bore an unfinished equation. The rain on the windows had slowed to a patient tick. Mr. Pritchard stood alone and stared at his hands, as if answers were written there. Outside the nurse's office, a small crowd formed: students, a counselor, the resource officer, loitering like weather. Jada stood up when she saw Ava. Malik tried to too, but his legs trembled, a warning. "Baby," Ava said, hand already reaching, her eyes scanning his neck, her breath steady because his wasn't. "I'm here." And down the hallway, a door with frosted glass opened on a polished office, and a principal who had already begun a sentence that would define how the next storm would break. "Mrs. Carter, let's de-escalate." "Watch me," Ava said without turning. Her voice was low and iron. "I'm about to escalate until my son is safe." Ava did not walk so much as cut a line through air. The hallway's fluorescent lights hummed like a warning she ignored. The school resource officer, a broad-shouldered man with a practiced calm, stepped forward. "Ma'am, you can't." "Move," Ava said. He moved. Not much, just enough to avoid being run over by a woman whose gravity made polite rules irrelevant. The counselor behind him started. "We understand you're upset." And Ava's laugh came out like a blade. "You don't understand anything yet," she said. "Where is he?" Nurse Rodriguez opened the door. "Here," she said softly, and stepped aside. Malik was perched on the edge of the cot, like he was ready to bolt if the universe gave him an exit. The freckles across the bridge of his nose, tiny constellations Ava had memorized when he was 5, were stark against skin, flushed with adrenaline. He tried to smile, a crook thing that had always undone her. Ava crossed the room in 3 strides. "Let me see." Her fingers were warm and cool at once, tracing the place where fingers had been. She didn't flinch. She'd learned not to in an ambulance, not to while kneeling on gravel beside a stranger's wreckage. But a tremor rippled through her that no training could contain. "It's not bad," Malik said, lying for her. Jada stood like a witness called to the stand. "Miss Carter, I saw." Ava squeezed Jada's shoulder. "Thank you for acting like a friend and not a bystander." The principal, Ms. Delgado, had arrived, flanked by an assistant with a tablet and an apology already forming. "Mrs. Carter, I'm Principal Delgado. Let's find a space where we can talk." "We'll talk here." Ava didn't turn. "In the open." When harm happens in the open, so does accountability. Miss Delgado's face flickered the tiniest betrayal of discomfort, then resolved into professional concern. "Your son appears stable. We can make a formal report, and there are procedures." "Procedure didn't keep an adult's hand off his neck," Ava said. She adjusted the collar of Malik's hoodie, like she could reset the dignity stolen with those fingers. "Procedure won't slow a story you can't control anymore." The resource officer shifted. "Mrs. Carter, what's your name?" Ava asked without looking at him. Officer Trent? Officer Trent, Ava said, my son is not a suspect. He's a child who was assaulted. You will not put your hands on him. You will not separate him from me. And you will not ask him questions without counsel present. If you disagree, call your supervisor and my lawyer at the same time and we'll let them argue it out on speaker. Trent's jaw worked once, twice, then set. Understood, Ms. Delgado tried again. Emotions are high. Let's keep this from escalating. You keep using that word as if the goal is calm, Ava said. The goal is truth. Calm can come after. The assistant's tablet chimed. News travels like electricity in a high school. By now, 2 versions of the video existed, the raw and the screen recorded, and both were multiplying. A teacher from down the hall slipped in, looked at Malik, and looked away. The room filled up with eyes. Tell me exactly what happened, Ava said to Malik, her voice softening to the register that had coaxed fevers down and nightmares out. No edits. No, I'm fine. Just the truth. Malik swallowed. He told me to stand. I asked a question. He said you people always challenge first. Then he pushed me here. His hand rose to the back of his neck and stopped short of touching. It wasn't long, but it was enough. Did you hit him? Did you push him first? No. Shame and anger tangled in his face. I wanted to. I didn't. Jada nodded fiercely. He didn't. I saw the whole thing. Do you still have the video? Ava asked. Jada's phone was already in her palm. Yes, ma'am. Ava took a breath that hit bottom and anchored there. Okay, she said. Here's what happens next. We preserve every pixel. We document that mark. She turned to Nurse Rodriguez. May I take photos? With timestamps? Yes, I'll note everything in his file. The nurse's voice steadied. She had been in rooms like this, knew the choreography of care and the choreography of covering up, and could recognize which dance was about to be performed. Miss Delgado spread her hands. Mrs. Carter, the district has policies. We'll place Mr. Pritchard on leave pending investigation. You'll call it administrative leave and keep paying him while you ask him whether what we all saw is what we all saw, Ava said. Meanwhile, you'll send a memo about civility and post a statement about healing our community without naming harm. No. Mrs. Carter. No, Ava repeated, quiet as thunder. Name it. A white teacher laid hands on my black son in a classroom. The wound isn't just on his neck. It's in the message sent to every kid who looks like him. You won't heal what you won't name. For a beat, even the fluorescent lights seemed to listen. The door to the corridor swung wider. 2 more students hovered, phones tucked, but recording in their minds. The resource officer drifted toward the hall, triangulating between watchfulness and retreat. The assistant's tablet chimed again. Now the superintendent was asking for a brief. And somewhere in the building, behind a closed door, Mr. Pritchard sat with his face in his hands, already draft editing a narrative. He was disruptive. I felt threatened. My hand slipped. Ava pressed a kiss to Malik's forehead. You are not what he tried to make you, she said, low enough that only he could hear it. Malik nodded. Tears pooled, didn't fall. He looked like a boy and an almost man in the same frame. Mrs. Carter, Miss Delgado said, choosing a different tactic. If we can agree on ground rules, we can all avoid making this worse. Worse for whom? Ava asked. Because the calculus changes depending on where you're standing. The hallway swelled with bodies. A custodian peered in as if to check for spills. A science teacher leaned halfway through the doorway and then retreated, guilt twitching his mouth. The air felt tight. A room full of lungs holding back the same breath. Then a sound cut through the crowd, the echo of dress shoes striking linoleum with purpose. Superintendent Wallace, gray suit pressed sharp, arrived like a PR statement made flesh. He took in the scene, the mother, the boy, the hovering staff, and rearranged his expression into concern. Mrs. Carter, he said, hand extending. I'm deeply. Ava didn't take it. I'll accept your apology when you say what you're apologizing for. He recalibrated mid-syllable. for the harm done to your son in a classroom under our care." "Good," Ava said. "Now keep your apology public." Wallace glanced at the phones that were and weren't visible. He nodded once, a man who understood optics, if not always truth. "We'll convene a board session tonight," he said. "We'd like you and Malik to speak if you're willing." A ripple ran through the hallway. Jada exhaled. Miss Delgado's shoulders dropped a fraction. Ava said, "We'll speak, but not to be your proof that the system works. We'll speak to be the reason it changes." She gathered Malik's backpack, cut a path through the crowd again, and the school parted around them like a river around a stone. Behind them, policy and panic began their usual waltz. Ahead, rain had stopped, and the sky wore that raw, scrubbed look it gets after a storm breaks but refuses to end. By 3 o'clock, the video had tunneled out of adolescence and into adulthood, surfacing in timelines where outrage takes root, and in group chats where the captions get sharper. The version with captions, "He said you people," went further than the one without. A local reporter DM'd Jada. A cousin posted a thread with context, screenshots, and a memory of 4th grade when a teacher had confused Malik with another black boy for an entire semester. Ava let the internet do what it does while she did what a mother does. At home she brewed ginger tea like her own mother had done for anger that threatened to burn a throat. She told Malik to shower, not because cleanliness fixed harm, but because it gave hands and mind a job. She took photographs of the faint red halo at the base of his neck, her jaw tight the way people's jaws get when they're trying not to chew through a leash. When the knock came, it came with the polite rhythm of officialdom. Officer Trent stood on the porch with a woman in a blazer whose badge read Child Protective Services. Ava opened the door and the wind carried the smell of wet leaves into the living room. "We're here to do a wellness check," the CPS worker said. Ava's laugh didn't have time to become sound. "On whom?" she asked. "On Malik," the woman said evenly. "It's routine when there's an incident at school." "Of an adult grabbing a child by the neck?" Ava asked. "And your first reflex is to check the child's home?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "We're fine. But since you're here, you can check the system. It's not well." The CPS worker flushed. "May we speak to Malik?" "You may speak to him in my presence," Ava said, "and we'll record." Trent shifted his weight, eyes scanning the street more than the house. "We also need to take a brief statement." "You'll get a detailed statement tonight," Ava said, "in a room where your bosses have to listen." Malik came down the stairs wearing a hoodie that still smelled faintly of the detergent his grandmother preferred. He looked smaller somehow, and more himself than he had an hour before. He sat on the edge of the couch. The CPS worker asked gentle questions with hard edges. Malik answered without apologizing. When it was done, Ava thanked the woman by her first name, Kendra, and watched a person emerge from behind a badge. "I'm sorry," Kendra said at the door, quiet enough that it could be a secret, "for what I'm part of and what I can't fix." "Use the parts you can," Ava said. "That's where systems change in the seams." By 5, Superintendent Wallace had posted a statement. "We are aware of an incident. We value every student. We are investigating." The district PR person had copied the language from crises past. The comments alternated between "fire him now" and "there must be more to the story." The story always asks to be more when it implicates people who look like you. At 6, a call came from an unknown number. "This is Eric Miller," a voice said. "I'm an attorney. A friend forwarded your video." "I'm not suing for a payday," Ava said. "Good," Eric said, "because litigation is a desert. We can use it as a tool, but I'd rather help you map a route that changes the terrain." He offered pro bono representation. He said words like demand letter and public records request and pattern. He texted templates. He told Ava to sleep if she could. The board meeting felt like a small town election, night buzzing lights. News vans, people who had learned the building by coming here only when something hurt. Ava and Malik took seats near the front. Jada arrived with her mother, who squeezed Ava's hand like a tether. Mr. Pritchard entered through a side door with a representative from the teachers' union and the pinched look of a man who has realized that the cost of a reflex is public. After the pledge and the roll call and the minutes approved, the chair cleared her throat. "We will begin with public comment." "Point of order," Eric Miller said from his seat. "Before public comment, we request that this board state on the record whether the teacher has been removed from the classroom and whether the district has a clear policy prohibiting staff from initiating physical contact with students except to prevent imminent harm." The chair blinked. "This is not the format." "Then change it," Ava said, rising. The room rippled as if a breeze passed through. "Because the format you prefer is the one where a mother's grief gets filed under 3 minutes and a buzzer?" Wallace leaned into his microphone. "Mr. Pritchard has been placed on leave pending investigation." "Paid," someone called from the back. "Per contract," Wallace said. "And the policy?" Eric asked. The board attorney shuffled papers like they'd hold an answer between them. "The district discourages physical contact," she read, "and permits reasonable restraint." "Define reasonable," Ava said. Silence stretched. The chair exhaled. "Mrs. Carter, you have the floor." Ava placed a photograph on the podium, 2 inches of a boy's neck, with a faint red print that meant everything. She told them about breath, about hands that save and hands that seize. She did not mention race because it was already in the room. She named it because truth can rot if it's only implied. She said you people backed to them and watched the way some flinched like she'd cussed, not like the harm had been done in their building on their clock. Malik walked to the mic and spoke like someone who has always hated microphones because they make the world too loud. "I am not the threat," he said. "I am the child you promised to educate." Then the room shifted. A boy from last year spoke about being sent to the hallway for answering too fast. A girl told a story about hands hovering too close to her hair. A custodian cleared his throat and said he'd seen a thing he hadn't liked and hadn't felt safe naming it. The pattern Eric had predicted began to sketch itself in testimony, thin lines connecting incidents that alone looked like weather, but together looked like climate. When Mr. Pritchard spoke, he used the language of lawyers and fear. "I felt unsafe," he said. He was escalating. He tried to make his mouth a soft place for hard words. My intention was to guide, not harm." A voice from the back, an older black woman with a church hat and a straight spine, called out, "Then why was your hand on his neck and not on your heart?" The board chair banged a gavel. The room laughed, not because harm was funny, but because the truth sometimes sounds like a joke when it cuts perfect. Eric slid a packet to the board. "Public records request," he said. "All complaints involving Mr. Pritchard in the last 5 years, all policy language, all training logs." The board attorney frowned. "Will respond within the statutory." "No," Ava said. "Respond now with something better than process. Respond with courage." The chair looked at Wallace, then at the crowd, then at the cameras, each lens a tiny democracy. "We will recess for 10 minutes, she said. "When we return, this board will vote on immediate termination." Gasps, applause, the gavel again. The room buzzing like a hive that has finally agreed on where to move. Outside the chamber, Mr. Pritchard sagged against a wall, face ashen. He looked not at Ava but past her, as if searching for a door that might not exist. In the corridor, Officer Trent stood at parade rest and watched the tide turn. And because narrative rarely moves in a straight line, because systems push back when pushed, a man in a suit that cost too much rushed down the hall, with a folder held like a weapon. "New footage," he announced, breathless, to the board attorney. An angle from the classroom camera. The door swung shut. The crowd murmured. Ava put a hand on Malik's back, felt the muscles jump under her palm, and whispered, "Whatever edit they bring, we bring the whole." The new footage was grainy and framed like a poor memory. It showed bodies as shapes and intentions as guesses. It showed a teacher's arm move and a boy's shoulders stiffen. It showed nothing of words. It never does. The board attorney replayed it and pointed at pixels like they could absolve. "See the hand? It's more on the shoulder. The angle is misleading. Angles don't have ethics, Eric said. People do. They filed back in. The board chair's face betrayed nights of sleep missed long before tonight. Before we vote, council will summarize. Summarize this, Ava said, and she tapped the mic with a fingertip steady as a metronome. Your policy doesn't say no hands. Your training doesn't say stop when you feel your power building instead of your patience. Your cameras see in grayscale. My son bleeds in color. The first eye sounded like a stone dropped into a well, distant and decisive. The second stumbled, then found itself. The third cracked. The fourth wobbled and landed. The fifth paused until the room collectively leaned. "Aye," the chair said finally, and a roof-held breath rushed out. Mr. Pritchard's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Whatever defense he'd prepared fell apart in air. The union rep murmured about due process. Eric nodded, yes, due process and accountability, too. Two things can be true and only one of them is urgent. Ava didn't cheer. She sunk into her chair like a runner crossing a finish line that turned out to be a checkpoint. Malik's hand found hers and laced their fingers, a small architecture of survival. The board moved to the next agenda item: bus repairs, HV grades, and the cruelty of normalcy pressed in. The cameras began to pack. The crowd thinned. The buzz moved to the parking lot, where streetlights haloed people into small, earnest conspiracies. A church deacon pressed a card into Ava's hand. We host community circles. A social worker offered a workshop on bias for staff. A student asked Malik if he'd speak at their assembly. By the time the building emptied, the linoleum shone like it had swallowed the entire night and was pretending not to be heavy. Ava and Malik walked the long corridor toward the front doors. Officer Trent fell into step a respectful distance behind, not escorting, not trailing, just present. At the trophy case, they stopped. Malik's reflection stood among frozen athletes. "I was tired of being quiet," he said, not to the glass. "You were brave," Ava said. "Brave and right aren't the same thing, but they live next door." "I don't want to be the kid in a video," he said. "The kid everyone knows for a neck. You're Malik," Ava said. "Your name is bigger than any clip." Ava stepped forward enough that he could not misunderstand. "Do not hand that to me like a burden," she said. "Carry it to the other rooms you've shaped with your fear. Carry it to the kids whose names you never learned because you called them by the wrong ones. Carry it to whoever trained you and then retrain yourself." He nodded, ashamed in a way that might spackle into defensiveness by morning. He got into his car. The door shut with a muffled thud that sounded like an ending and wasn't. "Home?" Malik asked, voice thin with weariness. "Home," Ava said. She looked up at the dark ridgeline of the school roof, and then forward. Ava closed her laptop. The house creaked like old houses do when they settle around their people. Malik's door stood ajar. Inside, he slept with one arm crooked over his head, the way he had as a toddler. Ava watched his chest rise and fall, counted to 8, breathed with him. Her phone buzzed one more time. It was Jada. You speak for us. Tell me where to stand tomorrow. Ava typed. Beside us, then ahead of us, then beside someone else who needs it. She put her phone face down. In the dark was a companion that didn't ask questions. The policy was 12 pages long at first, and then it was 5. Ava and a half-dozen others stripped it down to sentences that couldn't be wiggled through. Staff shall not initiate physical contact with students except to prevent imminent harm. De-escalation training required annually. Complaints will be logged and reported publicly in aggregate. Anonymous reporting mechanism protected from retaliation. They rewrote the procedures that had been written to produce delay into ones that produced action. At the first training, in the cafeteria with a projector that hummed, Ava stood next to a facilitator whose job was to teach adults how to manage their own nervous systems. A slide read, "Power makes your hands heavy. Make them lighter." Some teachers sat with arms crossed, faces suspicious. Others leaned forward with relief, like people who'd been waiting for permission to be better. Ava did not perform forgiveness. She did perform clarity. She told them what her son's breath had sounded like when rage and fear took turns in his chest. She said, "What you call discipline, our children experience as danger. Your hands are louder than your intentions." In a side room, a restorative circle met without fanfare. Malik agreed to sit in it, not for spectacle, but because curiosity is a kind of courage, too. He spoke once and then listened. Kids told stories about hallway passes and side-eyes and the way you can learn a teacher's weather the minute you step into a room. A novice teacher cried quietly. An older teacher said he'd taught for 30 years and had never once been trained on what to do with his fear except to pretend he didn't have it. When it was Mr. Pritchard's turn, not that day, not that week, but later, he came to a circle and sat down like a man entering cold water. He didn't defend. He tried and failed, and then stopped trying. "I thought respect was a door you knocked down," he said. "Turns out it's a door you don't touch unless you're invited." No one applauded. Change rarely gets clapped for at the speed it deserves. But something exhaled in the room, and it wasn't just relief. It was responsibility moving to a new address. The board voted to adopt the policy with only one dissent. The union negotiated language that kept due process but did not shield harm. The superintendent scheduled quarterly public reporting. Eric filed one lawsuit for the record and withdrew it when the district signed an agreement to implement training across all schools and to bring in a third-party auditor. A reporter did a follow-up that wasn't as widely shared as the first story because algorithms prefer the moment of harm to the work of repair. At home, Malik got his breath back in increments. He laughed more. He asked more questions in class. He and Jada started a student-led bystander-to-upstander campaign that involved role plays so awkward they looped back around to useful. He made a TikTok about friction and justice that somehow made both terms feel like physics. He asked Ava if they could volunteer at the youth center on Saturdays. He texted Kendra from CPSA, "Thank you for coming to a circle as a person, not a file." One Saturday in November, Ava and Malik hosted neighbors and teachers at the park. They called it hands off, hands on, hands off our kids, hands on our shared future. Kids chalked the sidewalk with words like safe, learn, try again. A brass quintet from the high school band played songs that made the old heads smile. On a card table, someone set out ginger tea and lemon bars that crumbled exactly right. Ava watched Malik teach a younger kid how to balance a yardstick on his palm, how to adjust when it starts to fall. "Eyes up," Malik said. "Small moves." Miss Delgado came by late, sleeves rolled up, hair loose from its principal bun. She looked less like an emblem and more like a human. "I was wrong," she told Ava without preamble. about escalation, about where calm belongs. Me too, Ava said. About how fast I thought change would feel. They stood together and watched as two kids argued over a basketball, and then negotiated a turn-taking schedule that felt like the first successful treaty in history. Somewhere nearby, a teacher who had crossed his arms at the training crouched to tie a first-grader's shoe, hands gentle like they'd been studying. When the sun slipped behind the trees, Malik wandered over. "We good?" he asked. "We're better," Ava said. "Tomorrow we work on good again." He grinned that crooked grin. "I like having a tomorrow that isn't about what happened to me, but about what I'm doing." Ava ruffled his hair, and he ducked like he was still 10. "You're doing a lot," she said, "and you're just getting started." At home that night, Ava pulled a shoebox from the closet inside. Photos of Malik at 6 in a Batman cape, at 8 with a gap-toothed grin, at 12 with a science fair ribbon. She added a new photo, a close-up of the back of his neck, taken under kitchen light the night of the board meeting. Printed without filters, she wrote on the back, "We named it. We changed it. Keep naming. Keep changing." She slid the box back onto the shelf. Outside, the neighborhood lay quiet, the kind of quiet that means people are resting, not hiding. The house breathed around her like a patient finally out of immediate danger. Ava sat in the living room and let her shoulders drop. She didn't mistake a policy for a promise. But she knew the difference between being alone and being accompanied, between a machine that runs you over and a mirror you're forced to look into. On his desk upstairs, Malik's physics worksheet lay open. In the margin, next to a problem about force and mass, he had written in pencil, "Power is pressure without consent. Justice is pressure with purpose." He'd underlined it twice. He'd solved the problem. If you ask them a year later what changed, what really changed, beyond a name in a personnel file and a new paragraph in a handbook, they would say this: breath. Breath in hallways. Breath in classrooms. Breath in the small pauses where hands once reached and now stayed at a person's sides. The air held more space because people chose to make it. And on mornings when the rain stitched the town together, on days when the news tried to flatten them into something with sharp corners and no air, they remembered what Ava had said in a room with fluorescent lights and a microphone. Name it. Change it. Then name what you change so no one can pretend it never needed changing. They kept naming. They kept changing. They kept their hands light. They kept their eyes up. Small moves. Big difference.